And we're live.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Roll call.
Councilmember Bowman,
Present.
Councilmember Farrelletto,
Here.
Councilmember Golombek,
Here.
Councilmember Nowakowski,
Present.
Council President Pridgen,
Here.
Majority Leader Rivera,
Present.
President Pro Temp Scanlon,
Present.
Councilmember Wingo,
Present.
Councilmember Wyatt.
Here.
Quorum is present.
From the top.
Item number 1, call for special session.
Motion to receive and file.
Second by Councilmember Bowman.
Item number 2, discharge item 20-1339.
Motion to adopt.
Second by Councilmember Farrelletto.
Chairman, motion to take item 4 out of order.
Second by Councilmember Wyatt.
Item number 4, ordinance amendment, chapter 479.
Motion to discharge.
All right, this item, well, we discharged, this item in front of us, which is the ordinance for 479. I don't know if anyone has the sponsor, if you have any comments.
Just want to thank my colleagues who supported this item. Unfortunately, we had to go through this exercise, but that's democracy at work. We put forth a resolution back in March because our primary concern was for the safety of children at their most vulnerable times when they arrive at school and when they leave school. The administration overturned that veto for the entire day. And I've heard from so many residents who have been harmed because they have gotten tickets, not during the times that we initially prescribed, but outside of those times at 10:30, at 11 o'clock, at 12 noon, at 1 o'clock. That was not the intent of this legislation. So I am happy that we've worked with the administration to get those hours back to what we initially intended, so that again, the focus is on the safety of the children, not for us to ingratiate ourselves with additional finances that, again, people who are suffering right now in the midst of a pandemic. I've talked to a number of seniors who are just devastated that they've unfortunately got several tickets, and some of them have said they didn't see the beacons. I'm hopeful that the beacons are working. I know for myself, I did go and see that the beacons were working, but some people have said the beacons are not working. So we have worked a compromise that we will extend the beacons out further so that people can see them in a more meaningful time to slow down their speed and not abruptly be right on the beacon. And also hopeful that, again, that we focus again on the striping and those other things that we can do in addition. If it's about student safety, then there's other things that we can do. I know Councilmember Nowakowski has put forth legislation that we take some of this money and that it could be used towards that, because people have complained that we're talking about safety in front of a school, but one of them is about the side street where people speed up that's adjacent to that school. So hopefully down the road, we can have that additional conversation, but I guess I'm okay with this compromise, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that children are safe at the times when they're most vulnerable, and that people are not getting tickets at times when children are safe in their classrooms learning. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Rivera, Councilmember Wingo.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, this amendment allows for the beacons to be on an hour before, an hour after arrival, an hour before, an hour after departure. It also allows, this is the compromise, for additional hours in certain circumstances. If we truly care about our children and they are still arriving to campus for special events where you have large gatherings, the compromise was that they would then inform the council member, the respective council member in those districts. I have a school in my district that perhaps if the superintendent says, hey, we want to keep the cameras on because they have to walk from one building to another, they have to cross the street during the course of the day, then I think that is a fair compromise. If I'm truly looking out for the children's interests, I will certainly support that. I don't want anyone getting injured or even worse by not allowing that. So the compromise was to allow it in certain circumstances by contacting the council member, the respective council member, and that was the compromise.
All righty, thank you. Councilmember Wingo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm of the persuasion that the students use the city of Buffalo all throughout the day. Me being in the school district and working in the schools for 15 years, I've personally witnessed and even have taken my students out of the classroom to utilize the immediate area so that the students can exercise and also use the city as their campus. Now, I would have preferred that we leave the cameras on all day because the students are in and out of the schools all day. I also requested the data from the parking department from the city of Buffalo, which clearly shows that as soon as the beacons are turned off and the cameras are no longer on, folks are speeding up and over 40 miles an hour between the hours of 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. I'm looking at the data right now. And if we're talking about safety, then what about the folks who are walking and crossing those streets when the students are quote unquote safely in their classrooms? What about all of the other pedestrians? What about the people who need protections while the students are in school? Like Matthew Walker, who literally just got hit in my district, crossing the street in a crosswalk at Canisius College. There were so many close calls from students and alum alike who have almost gotten hit by cars speeding, and Matthew got hit based on eyewitness testimony. He got hit because the driver was trying to go around other people in the crosswalk. And Matthew, unfortunately, was struck by that vehicle. I personally, and I'm going to let the school district know, and all the private schools and the parochial schools, I understand that in this legislation, it says in section 4, part 4, section 6, it says the district council member for the district in which a school is located shall approve aforementioned schedule or any changes to a schedule in writing in order for it to go into effect. If the council member approves of such schedule, the schedule shall go into effect upon their signature. School districts, private schools, parochial schools, whatever school that needs to apply to the city for an extended period of time for your school zone cameras to be activated, you already have Councilmember Wingo's approval for any school in the Maston district. My staff has already been briefed and told, put my signature on it. So if you request it, put the signature on it. Why? Because we need to protect everyone all the time. And what we've seen based off the data, since we claim to be a data-driven body, what we've seen from the data is that if we keep the cameras on, people drive the speed limit. If we turn the cameras off, people then speed. The data, it's right here. 48, no, this is 69 people, 70 people speed after 9 o'clock, between 9 and 10, 107 speed between 10 and 11, 80 speed between 11 and 2, 11 and 12, 12 to 1, 60. The data is here. People go, and watch this. Before that, people don't speed while the cameras are on. 45, 77, 76, while the cameras are on, 48. But then when the cameras are off, 148, 138, 145, 134, 114. The data is giving us the evidence that we need. So for Maston District, if your school is in the Maston District and you make an appeal to your superintendent, and that superintendent makes an appeal to the Department of Public Works, I'm already approving it. So with that said, I was not a part of the conversations that got us to this point. I was not included in those discussions where the compromise was made. But since this is the compromise, and since we're going to have to live with it, since the votes clearly are, they have the votes to do this, then it is what it is. I will vote for this, but just knowing that if your school is in the Maston district, I will be approving any and all of your appeals to extend whatever time to protect not just the children in the school, but the pedestrians and everyone alike. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Farrelletto.
Thank you very much, Council President. I know everyone's been talking about different things with this ordinance amendment. One thing I wanted to point out that's in it is for improved signage. Probably the biggest complaint that I've received from people that have gotten tickets is that they were not aware that they are in a school zone. And I completely understand that on certain streets, Main Street, for example, you have 2 lanes going in both ways. People take the same route. Many of them have been taking it for years, if not decades, and they're not aware that they're in a school zone. And I think with having improved signage, people will know that they're in a school zone. We'll see significantly more levels of compliance. So I think it's extremely important that the Department of Public Works improves the signage so people know. I understand and was told that all of the signage right now is in compliance with state law. However, each school zone is unique. The school zone on a residential street may require different signage than on a busy commercial street that has 4 lanes of traffic versus 2 lanes of traffic. And I believe that every single person driving should be clearly aware that they're entering a school zone. So we need to take a serious look at the signage. This legislation is calling for increased beacons further away from the school zone so people know that a school zone is approaching. And I think once the signage is addressed, we'll have a significantly more higher compliance rate, and that is what we want. We don't want people getting tickets. We want people complying during school hours, and I hope the Department of Public Works is working with community groups, council members, making sure that it's clearly visible when people are entering school zones. And I think the component of this legislation that requires additional beacons at a further distance, warning drivers, takes a real significant step in getting everyone to that place. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Gullumbeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I want to echo much of what Councilmember Wingo said. I think that one of the problems that we had with this legislation is that there was confusion among residents and not residents. In my district, I was talking with Mr. Helfer, and he said that about 50% of the people that have gotten the tickets are non-City of Buffalo residents. You know, that's a concern of mine, especially because with the semi-lockdown and schools closed and things like that, a street like Military Avenue, which has between 18 and 20,000 vehicles a workday normally, I believe is cut in half. And so the majority of the people that are getting the tickets right now, which equals about half of them, are City of Buffalo residents. I believe that when things open up more, that you're going to see more people coming in from outside the City of Buffalo, and they're going to use ignorance of the law as an excuse. Well, I can tell you that I have gotten tickets before in Kenmore, Tonawanda, Orchard Park, and ignorance of the law was never accepted there. I do agree with my colleagues that we need to do a better job with the markings and with the beacons. And I know that this council was adamant about trying to include as much forewarning as possible. I wish that all of them could sort of be like the way McKinley High School is on Elmwood Avenue. There's a warning well before you actually get into the school zone. I know that in some places that I've driven by, it seems like, oh my gosh, there's the school zone, and there's the warning, and suddenly you're in the school zone already. The one thing that I am uncomfortable with is the council members signing off on this for numerous reasons. Basically, what I believe is going to happen is that you're going to have a bureaucratic nightmare. For the sake of argument, if I take a libertarian approach that, well, let the speed limit sort itself out, and I never sign anything, and another council signs every single time, as Mr. Wingo said that he is going to do, in which I'm of that same opinion, by the way. But I think you're going to have more confusion in the city of Buffalo. I think we'd be better off if we did the 2 hours during drop off and the 2 hours during pickup, or the straight 6, 7, 8 hours throughout the school day, because I think that then you have some consistency for people, whether they're the locals or people that are coming into the city of Buffalo. I want to echo what Mr. Ferraletto said, and Mr. Wyatt, that my main goal is not to collect money. My main goal is to get safety for the students and for the children that are around the schools. One of the reasons that I originally supported this was because having the cameras there, instead of giving somebody a fine of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars being given by a police officer, which is a moving violation, this gives you a $50 fine. And I think that that is much fairer. I know that I got my first speeding ticket when I was 18 years old on Military Road. I've been very, very careful on Military Road since 1983, because that's where I got my first ticket. I learned a lesson very young. But it was a lesson that stuck with me. So usually I see a compromise as being something that, everybody's a little bit unhappy with. I'm not crazy about this, especially because each council member has to sign off on it. I think it's going to lead to a bureaucratic nightmare. But it is what it is. Thank you.
Mr. Scanlon is next.
Thank you. I'd like to be recorded the negative on this item. I believe that this item, as it is presented, will lead to a great deal of confusion for the residents of the city of Buffalo. Not having a uniform program throughout the city will leave the city of Buffalo, and in particular the council, as Councilmember Glumbeck mentioned, open to a great deal of criticism. Allowing for individual council members to determine when the cameras will be in operation in their district, I think is problematic. I am not claiming for 1 second to know another council member's district better than he does. However, I do believe having a different set of rules in different areas throughout the city will lead to problems. And I know that some people on the counter side of that argument will say, well, if the beacon's flashing, then this school zone camera is in effect. They should know that. However, I think we're then asking people to react and understand this program in a rational manner. And I don't believe that that is always the case when it comes to receiving a ticket. I think there's probably a few of us who've received a ticket in the past and have been a little upset about it. So I think we're asking people to sit there and understand that it's acceptable in one area, not acceptable in another. And I think that's going to lead to problems. Another problem I have, and I'd just be upfront, I was in favor of the entire school day having the cameras operational. So as Councilmember Glumbeck mentioned, half of these tickets are from motorists from outside the city of Buffalo. And I think we all know for a fact that you cannot speed when you enter Lackawanna, West Seneca, Kenmore, things of that nature. And it's aggravating to think that people from the suburbs can speed right through the city and put city residents in harm's way. I've talked to some people who say, it's ridiculous that we have the cameras up in these districts, and they were school zones before, but I would argue that we use technological advances to increase safety in all industries all the time, and in particular I think we should be using them here when it comes to the well-being of the youth of our area and the people who live in the surrounding areas of those cities. As I mentioned, I was absolutely in favor of the full day cameras being in operation. However, because I think this is so confusing to people and going to pit council members and the residents of districts against one another, I would be in favor of the 2-hour windows at arrival and dismissal throughout the city of Buffalo. So for those reasons, I'd like to be recorded in the negative.
All right, I apologize. I had computer problems. Anyone else? Councilmember Farrelletto.
Thank you. I just want to add one more thing that I've received some questions about while we're all meeting together. I've had some questions and calls, people asking about where the cameras are currently located and where the tickets are issued. So right now, out of the 9 council districts, there are cameras in 3 of the districts, and over 90% of the tickets are issued between the Delaware and University District. So there has not been, for 6 of the council districts, there have not been any tickets issued at all. So people were just wondering where the cameras are, and there are currently 5 locations. And again, there's two in the Delaware District, 2 in University, and then 1 in the South District. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Noakowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just in closing, I do want to state that I will be following up with this ordinance with a complete streets resolution that I have currently in committee to talk about taking funding from this revenue to then invest in infrastructure around schools that will ultimately keep our children safe. And just in closing, I do know that the second point of this legislation gives council members discretion, and with discretion comes responsibility. And I just want the residents of the Fillmore District to know that I take that responsibility seriously, and I will be meeting with the schools in my district to come up with a plan that works for them and that will be based on heavily input from district members and principals that know their schools, and so that we can come up with something uniform and that makes sense. So thank you.
Councilmember Wingo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to answer my colleague's question, because I know that there are people in the city of Buffalo who are concerned about where the active cameras are. I'm going to give you the addresses of the cameras and where they are. And the reason why the cameras are on at these locations is because the students were actually in these buildings. And also the reason why the cameras are at certain locations is because of the data. So even though we have over 80 something schools in the city of Buffalo, only 20 cameras right now, and it's based off the data that we've received from the Department of Parking and Enforcement. So in South Buffalo, you have 1123 Abbott Road. That's at Notre Dame Academy. Is that in South Buffalo? South Buffalo, 1123 Abbott Road at Notre Dame Academy. The enforcement hours were 7:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. All right, and then there was 1177 Delaware at Canisius High School. And then at 1236 Delaware at Canisius High School, 1 northbound, 1 southbound. And those enforcement hours were 7:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Those are the first 3 cameras. And then you have 2 locations, 3 cameras, 54 Colvin at Nichols. That's also in Delaware District. And those enforcement hours were 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then at 68 Colvin southbound at Nichols Academy from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. That was the 3rd camera. The 4th camera is at 3125 Bailey at Buffalo Promise Neighborhood Academy. And those enforcement hours were 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And that is the northbound in the facing the University District. Then southbound, of course, is in Masson District, 3130 Bailey Avenue, Buffalo Police Academy. Enforcement hours 7 a.m. to 7 to 6 p.m. Those were the enforcement hours. And last but not least, 3233 Main Street at St. Joseph School, St. Joseph University. And then there's another camera across the street at 3236 Main Street at St. Joseph School. So those are the 5 locations where the cameras are and the enforcement hours. But now the hours, of course, after the passing of this ordinance, it will be 2 hours at pickup, 2 hours at drop off. And if the county does not go from yellow to orange or to red even, you could safely assume that these new hours will be posted on these signs in these various districts And if these schools should close, I guess then we'll have to have further conversation with the administration to find out how they're going to move forward with this safety school zone program. And that's the information.
Thank you. Councilmember White.
Thank you, Council President. Just to be clear, if there's any confusion, it wasn't brought on by this Common Council. The confusion is where these signs are located in many different areas, in many different ways, behind trees, behind bushes. And that's where the confusion comes in, where you're not notified fully in advance of the location of the cameras. And so, you know, we as a Common Council came forth and we put forth and requested that beacons be in place. But I would like to know that these beacons have been tested, because there have been numerous complaints that people that say that these beacons are not on. These beacons aren't the big bright beacons that you would typically see if you're on an interstate or something. And I wish we could have done something that, because again, we want to make it fully be transparent that this is not about us taking advantage of motorists or taking advantage of people's situation. Because again, in the midst of pandemic, again, the question is, where do you get $1.7 million in 7 days for people who are already struggling? I was on the phone with a woman that I wish I could have paid her $400 worth of tickets myself because she only had $1,000 and she's on a fixed income. You know, this is a very difficult time. So we're trying to balance out the fact that we want children to be safe with the fact that we want enforcement, but not to the extent that it's for an entire school day, when for the most part, children aren't taking trips to the zoo and those things during this pandemic. For the most part, they're in their building. They're not out being remote. So I think the flexibility that a council member has in making additional determinations is something that, again, keeps children safe. And that's something that council member has to deal with. But again, if there was any confusion on this, it certainly wasn't brought on by the Common Council, because I think we've been very consistent in the legislation that we put forth from the very beginning, that the children most vulnerable time is when they arrive at school and when they depart from school, and that's what we wanted to cover. If we want to do some additional things, that we should be putting speed humps, as Councilmember Nowakowski has put forth, as well as making sure that there's striping in those areas. And again, making sure the signage is visible, so that the motorist knows that they're entering a school zone and they should be cautious about our babies. I don't want to look at eliminating this legislation, because there are people who said, why do we have it? Where was the documentation that says that this was important, that children are being harmed? But as a father, as an uncle, we don't want any child to be harmed. We don't want to wait till that accident happens for us to take action. So I think this is a prudent measure for us to do this at this point in time. To again, make sure our children are safe, but also make sure that we don't bring further harm to people who are already hurting, who are motorists. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Is anyone else? Councilmember Wingo.
Yeah, real quick, just a fact of the matter. This was approved in the budget. This program was approved in the budget. This program was supposed to bring in at least $2.3 million into this budget, and you all knew that. You knew that. Can't say we didn't, because you voted for the budget. Voted for the budget knowing that this program would bring the city revenue. And now how we're talking about the revenue from the program. So just for the record, we knew that this was going to generate revenue. We knew that people were going to speed. Why? Because the data said that people speed. I'm not calling anybody any villains or anything of that nature. Don't think that I'm disparaging anyone. But the fact is, you voted for the budget, which was included in here. Well, Brian, you're shaking your head. I know you didn't vote for it either, Brian. Brian says, no, I didn't vote for it. But the fact of the matter is, the money was in there. And now that the city is making revenue, the program is, for some reason or another, it has to be redone or revised. My heart goes out to everyone who may be hurting. But remember, and let's also realize, people who are financially hurting are not the only ones speeding. That's just a fact. They are not the only ones speeding. So let's stop making this about people who are poor who are getting tickets, because everyone has the same ability to not speed. I do agree with my colleagues as it relates to the signage. Let's put up better signage so that people can see that they're in a school zone, but there's still no excuse for folks to still be driving 40 and 50 miles an hour down a residential street. I'm not defending those people, poor or not poor, wealthy or not wealthy. I'm not defending that behavior, because if anyone, God forbids, my goodness, should get struck by a vehicle going that fast, the mortality rate increases exponentially. You voted for the budget.
All right. A few comments if everyone has had theirs. On the budget, we did vote on the budget, and if right now we look at the amount, if everyone paid their tickets, we are over the budget number of the 2.3 million. And that's with only 5 cameras on. We voted for a budget before COVID when we expected 20 cameras to be on, and within 1 year to receive approximately $2 million. In the first week, this program, if all tickets were paid, would generate over $1 million. Which, if the average, and when we talk about things going down as far as the tickets, it could potentially, if all 20 schools were open, generate $30 million in a year, potentially. So at the end of the day, I think that this council, I mean, I know we voted for it, but I was, for one, all the way from the beginning, only wanted it for several hours in the day, several hours in the night. So that didn't change. And I had discussions with people in administration about that, but it went forward. This council voted for it. That's how the council works. A majority voted for this. I do believe we need more traffic calming, as several of my colleagues have said, whether it's the rumble strips outside of the schools, and other traffic calming ways, so that we can make sure that a ticket is not the only way that we are trying to change behavior. But we need that in many parts of the city also. To think that these cameras are going to stop every infraction and every accident when they were intended by legislation to protect students and staff going into schools. At the end of the day, I don't think that this is a perfect compromise at all. I don't think probably any legislation is going to find perfection. However, if you remember, I was asking all the way through this process, is there a way for the schools to control the cameras so that if there is a big field day outside, if you got multiple classrooms walking around the neighborhood, now they can be activated. But the signage, if we're talking about changing behavior, part of the changing the behavior is going to be people knowing, I've got to look for this flashing beacon because the school might be doing something special. Right now, we don't have consistency. Right now, as we heard, different school hours. So the only thing that a motorist has is signage to know. And part of this, the compromise that my colleagues worked on, deals mainly with signage. A great amount, I won't say majority, but a great amount of the complaints that have poured into my office are people saying, I didn't see a beacon. And by the time I saw it, I was right on the camera. So I think that that's important if we're talking about the safety and changing the behavior of drivers, is that right now a driver doesn't know if I'm at Nichols what time unless they pay attention to the signage. If I'm at Canisius, unless they pay attention to the signage, which is what we all have to do as drivers, is pay attention to the signage, to a red light, to a green light. But if a green light is not high enough or at the right place, and I know the signage part of it is by the legislation from the state, but we also have a responsibility to make sure that the signs are big enough, bright enough, and early enough so that behavior can change. Second of all, when we talk about 50% of the people who got tickets from the suburbs and 50% were from the city, I do agree that during this time right now, you know, most people in the city don't have the expendable income, and I do want them to change behavior. Student safety is number one, and I believe if we're really, really concerned about student safety, it's not just about someone getting a ticket, but changing behavior by having multiple layers to warn motorists, to remind them that they're entering a school zone. And for instance, those bigger streets that were brought up, a Bailey, a Main Street, you know, I'm not sure if the signage that is applicable for a side street where I believe the majority, once these 20 cameras are on, a majority of those tickets are going to go to people in the city. And I don't, you know, the out of the city, in the city argument, that makes no difference to me. I don't care where you live. You know, you put a kid in danger, you put a kid in danger, or you speed and you speed. But at the end of the day, it will come from people who live in those neighborhoods. That's why I think that the signage is one of the most important parts of this compromise. Almost finally, the mayor has already signed this compromise. And I'm not saying he's thrilled about it, but at the end of the day, what many of us wanted was just the 2 hours in the beginning, 2 hours in the night. But we did agree that from hearing from colleagues and hearing from not only colleagues, but hearing from citizens that said, well, you know, what about when the kids are outside? Now, I'll be clear. I think if a group is going to the zoo and they're not crossing the street and they have an enclosed parking lot, why would we turn on the beacons for an enclosed parking lot where the students are safely almost in a bubble to go from the school right on the bus? And so I think that that's what this compromise. I would prefer personally not to have to be involved in this at all, but that's what compromises are. You don't get everything you want, but at the end of the day, I think that when this vote is over and if this vote goes through, that it is a start. I just want to remind everybody that all the schools are not open. I said to the administration, when the administration met with leadership and leadership was on that call, that this council has been rather cooperative in making changes, in ensuring that if something went forward, that if we needed to tweak it, that we are very, and the sponsor is on, that very willing to come back to the table and say, okay, let's look at this. This part works, this part doesn't work. But at the end of the day, who we work for are our constituents who overwhelmingly, other than the organized groups that have been on these calls, the calls that I've gotten to my office overwhelmingly have been about those who people say, we want safety, but I didn't see a camera. I didn't see, a beacon at all. And I didn't understand it. This way, the citizens of Buffalo, people visit Buffalo, they have to watch the signs. And if those beacons are in the right place at the right time and they're on, then our brain will click and say that this is, I've got to make sure because children are outside. So that's why I support it. All right. Hearing none, we've heard from everybody. Let's call the item and call the roll.
All right, item number 4, ordinance amendment, chapter 479. Councilmember Bowman.
Yes.
Councilmember Farrelletto.
Yes.
Councilmember Gullumbeck.
No.
Councilmember Noakowski.
Yes.
Council President Pridgen.
Yes.
Majority Leader Rivera.
You're muted, Majority Leader.
Sorry, yes.
President Pro Tem Scanlon.
No.
Councilmember Wingo.
Yes.
Councilmember Wyatt.
Yes.
Item pass.
Item passed, and as I've said, the mayor has already signed it for immediate passage in this compromise amendment with the administration and the Common Council that will now limit the hours of the speed cams to 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the dismissal, and there will be, there's a provision for moving the signs further out so that people are warned earlier, and there is a provision for special circumstances to be worked out with the Common Council member of the district. Next item.
Mr. Chair,
Council President, just to be clear on number 4, even though we have a 7-2 vote, can you get a second and a motion to approve?
Second by Councilmember Wyatt, and the motion approved by our majority leader.
All right. Item number 3,
Councilmember Wingo, you wanted to be recognized?
yes, two things. The clerk covered the first thing. The second thing was, I just want to make sure that I reiterate again, the only reason why I voted for this is because it now allows the schools the opportunity to make the appeal to the district council member, which of course, every school in Madison District, I've already said it on the record, that I will approve any extensions that you apply for that will potentially protect the students of your district. The answer is already yes. I want to make sure I'm on the record saying that.
You are on the record. Next item.
item number 3, veto message ordinance amendment, chapter 479, traffic ordinance.
Motion to receive and file.
Second by Councilmember Farrelletto.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, second by Councilmember Wyatt. Thank you.